Did you get a sense that they were ready for these kinds of questions? And, this is, obviously Kamala Harris is going to have a debate next week with Trump. I feel like she's going to need to have better answers going forward if she has any chance of success. You had to ask it multiple times questions twice because the answers weren't necessarily answering the question. They were answering what they wanted the question to be, which is often what politicians do. But it came off as a little evasive at times, I thought. Now, as is often the case these days, whenever there's a big high-profile interview like this, you took some heat from the left, as you noted, some heat from the right. What did you make of that criticism? I mean, the right, their problem was that you didn't necessarily, they felt, hold her down on some of her more nebulous policy positions. What would you say to that?
I think you just said, I tried.
Right.
I mean, you can't force somebody to answer a question, and I asked a follow-up. I tried to get more into the nitty-gritty and get the answer. And sometimes, my experience in doing interviews is that once you ask once, fine, twice, fine, three times, if you don't get a clear answer, that's kind of your answer.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about this interview between Dana Bash and Tom Cotton, okay? And you have Dana Bash going to confront Tom Cotton in ways that she would never do for Kamala Harris, okay? We all remember the absolute softball interview that Dana Bash gave to Kamala Harris, okay? And Dana Bash actually talked about that. You guys saw it at the beginning of this video. Dana Bash was speaking about how Democrats just don't answer questions. And part of the reason why is because liberal media propagandists like Dana Bash don't actually really press Democrats for answers to questions the same way they do for Republicans. Now, Dana is pretending that, well, I did what I could. I tried, right? I really tried, okay? But she didn't try, okay? Because we've seen Dana Bash try. And when she tries, the interviews actually kind of look like this, right? Which is this interview that she's going to do with Tom Cotton, in which Tom Cotton, unlike Kamala Harris, actually has the ability to answer the questions and to also, at the same time, set the mainstream liberal media straight as they tell their lies, as they push lies on their network in favor of Democrats and against Republicans, which is what Dana Bash is going to try to do in his interview against Tom Cotton, in which she's going to push the lie that Democrats and liberal media are telling about JD Vance and his response to the Georgia mass shooting. So I want to react to it because Dana Bash would never press a Democrat the same way that she presses Tom Cotton here in this interview.
I want to turn to a very different topic, and that is something that the Justice Department said this week. They detailed a Russian government effort to stoke divisions in the U.S. using front organizations and social media prominent right-wing influencers like Dave Rubin and Benny Johnson, who have ties to Tenet Media. Now, that's a company that the Justice Department says was being funded by Russian operatives. You sit on the Intelligence Committee. How worried are you that right-wing influencers, people who do have an impact on your constituents, are being funded either directly or indirectly by the Russian government in order to make an impact on this election?
Well, first off, Dana, we haven't been in session, so I haven't seen any intelligence about this matter. I've only seen the allegations I've read in the newspaper. People should not knowingly take money from the government of Russia or Iran or China or any other adversarial nation to try to influence the election. But I also think it's fair to say that a few memes or videos in the vast sea of political commentary is not going to make much of a difference in this election, nor has it in past elections as well. What did make a difference in the last election is the lies about Hunter Biden's laptop that more than 4 dozen former intelligence officials lied about in the middle of that campaign. And most networks, to include this one, bought that lie hook, line, and sinker. That did make a difference in the election. But I think a few videos or commentaries, which, again, you shouldn't do if you're out there in the business of commentating on elections, is not going to make a difference in the vast sea of commentary we see.
It sounds to me like you're downplaying the fact that Vladimir Putin is using people like Dave Rubin, whose show you went on in February, as a tool for his propaganda.
So I'm not downplaying Vladimir Putin's designs or Xi Jinping's designs or the Ayatollah's designs to try to influence our election. But using money to try to promote memes or videos on the internet is not exactly going to make a huge difference. Again, you shouldn't knowingly do that. I don't know if any of these people knowingly did it.
Do you know young people who some people only get their information from those memes and videos?
But Dana, what would be catastrophic is if a foreign government, say, hacked into the voter registration system during voting, or hacked into election machines and erased votes, or turned off the electricity in a big city on election day. Those are things that are serious threats. A few videos and memes.
Are those active threats? Are you?
I am worried about those kind of threats, sure.
Is that based on what you're being briefed on?
It's based on the vulnerabilities that all of our infrastructure around the country has. That worries me a lot more than a few videos or memes. Again, this is the kind of thing that foreign governments like Russia does, and no one should knowingly and wittingly partake in it.
And Tom Cotton handles it pretty well. So without further ado, let's get into it.
I want to ask you about another topic that is very much in the news this week, and that is the shooting in Georgia. We've all been seeing the texts, the heartbreaking texts, especially as parents, of students saying, "I love you," to their parents, students using the shirts off their backs to try to save their teacher. Republican vice presidential nominee JD Vance said after the shooting, quote, "I don't like that this is a fact of life," adding, "We don't have to like the reality that we live in, but it is the reality we live in." Do you accept that school shootings like this are just a way of life now?
No, absolutely not. And JD Vance doesn't either. He said that he doesn't want them to be a fact of life. And this week, the Associated Press got caught distorting that quote from him so bad that they had to retract it. But here's what we also know about that shooting, even as we're still gathering all the facts. It wasn't as bad as it might have been because there was a police officer on the school premises that was able to neutralize the shooter. Kamala Harris wants to take police officers out of school. She said it in the past. That's her position. It's not surprising because she's consistently taken positions against law enforcement throughout her career as a San Francisco liberal. If that police officer hadn't been there, if Kamala Harris had gotten her way, many more students and teachers might have been killed.
She was attacked when she ran for president in the Democratic primary. They were calling her Kamala Cop because she was the opposite of what you were saying. But I just want to stay on
Wow. Listen to this clown, right? Listen to this clown, Dana Bash, right? So, first and foremost, again, she's peddling this lie, okay, from the mainstream liberal media about JD Vance talking about the fact that he doesn't like that mass shootings are a fact of life. Now, here's the thing. The liberal media, they're trying to play on people's emotion by politicizing a tragedy, okay, for their own political gain. And the mainstream liberal media, they're participating in this as well, too. These are all disgusting people, right? Because that's what they're doing right now, okay? They're using dead children to push a political agenda. Now, what JD Vance said might not have sounded great to the average person who's not actually really listening to what he's saying, but what he's saying is actually correct in the sense that when you live in a country where you have Second Amendment rights, there are pros and there are cons. There are no solutions in life. There are only trade-offs, right? Because we allow people to carry firearms and to have access to firearms. As a result, you're going to have mass shootings. Right? It's just going to be something that is going to happen. It is statistically going to happen. Now, it's happening a lot more today than it used to happen in the past, but I think there are a lot of reasons for that. One of which being, we're just a different country culturally, right? We have a cultural problem, okay? But also on top of that, mass shootings have become sensationalized by the mainstream liberal media. Right? In the sense that every time one happens, because they're trying to use it against Republicans, they cover it nonstop, which ultimately inspires people to become copycat shooters in the future because they know that, hey, I can become famous. I can be used as a pawn against Republicans. Those are the few reasons why we see this happening. But the reality is that because we do have guns in this country, because we do have the right to carry firearms, you're going to have situations like this happen. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't do anything about it? No, it means that what you do is that you try your best to prevent it, but you understand that, yeah, stuff like this is going to happen just as a byproduct of the population having access to firearms, right? Just like, for example, as a byproduct of policing, you're going to have police brutality. Yes, you're going to have some bad cops, okay, because cops are just humans with guns. So statistically speaking, when you have millions upon millions of interactions between police and citizens on a yearly basis, yes, some of those actions are going to be messed up. Cops are going to do messed up things. Now, yes, you punish the cops who do messed up things, but that doesn't mean that you demolish law enforcement, you get rid of law enforcement, which is something that Kamala Harris called for, right? She called for defunding the police. You don't do that as a result of a few bad apples, right? Because statistically speaking, police brutality is pretty rare, especially if you're not a criminal, right? If you're not a criminal, it's basically not something that you have to worry about, right? Statistically speaking, does it happen? Yes. But just generally, you really don't have to worry about it, okay? Unless you're a criminal, okay? And even if you're a criminal, it's still pretty rare, right? So what I find to be fascinating about people like Dana Bash and the mainstream liberal media, when they talk about solutions for preventing mass shootings happening in schools, for as much as they want to talk about the GOP and what they haven't done in regards to banning guns more, because that's ultimately what they want, right? They want to ban guns, right? They just don't have the cojones to actually say it out loud that they want to ban all guns. But it's funny how Kamala Harris has come out and not only said that she wants to defund police, which is anti-law enforcement, something that Dana Bash failed to mention, right? She's trying to present Kamala Harris as if, oh no, Kamala Harris is actually tough on crime. And this is what she was known for during the Democrat primary. Well, during that same primary, and while she was vice president, running for vice president, she talked about how she wanted to defund the police. Not only did she want to defund the police, she also wanted to demilitarize schools. She wanted to take police officers out of school. And had a police officer not been at that Georgia high school, that mass shooting would have been a lot worse.
Being incarcerated for a couple of days is traumatic, much less the weeks, months, and years that we're seeing that happen. And so part of my plan is also a reduction of that. And then also, again, what we need to do about demilitarizing our schools and taking police officers out of schools. We need to deal with the reality and speak the truth about the inequities around school discipline.
So it's amazing to me how these liberal media anchors always want to drag the GOP on their networks to press them about why they don't want to ban more guns as a solution to preventing mass shootings, which, again, I don't think would prevent mass shootings, because you have mass shootings happen every day by criminals who get guns illegally, but yet, you know, these people never have anything to say about that, right? They're not concerned about those mass shootings, but yet, why are they not dragging Kamala Harris for being for taking police out of schools, which would make the problem worse, right? She explicitly came out here and said we should take police officers out of schools, which would have made the Georgia high school mass shooting a lot worse, right? And not only that, it would probably inspire more mass shootings because schools would become targets, right? Like obvious targets. I mean, they're already targets now, but if Kamala could have it her way and criminals or lunatics that think about shooting up schools, if they know that, okay, well, there's not going to be any cops in school, well, don't you think that will inspire more people to target schools because they know that there's not going to be a cop there with a gun or people with guns in the area to stop the mass shooter, right? Again, that is the conversation we should be having. What the liberal media should be doing is that they should be dragging Democrats on their network and asking them, hey, do you guys still want to remove cops from school after these cops basically stop this mass shooting in Georgia from being worse than what it could have been? That's the question that actually really should be asked here, right? Because under Democrat solutions, the problems get worse. They don't get better.
This topic of school shootings, because you're right, it could have been so much worse. And they do have measures in place in this school. But the fact that there are mental health problems, and we don't know exactly what was going on with this 14-year-old, 14, but there are mental health problems all across the world right now. It's bad. The difference between other countries and this country is that it is being expressed with gun violence. Is it not time to figure out a way to mitigate that part of the equation when it is affecting our children so often?
Well, I think one way to mitigate that is to enforce the laws we have on the books. Donald Trump did that. We had a severe crackdown on criminals using guns. Since Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have taken office, they have deprioritized that. They haven't focused on enforcing the laws that we have on the book. They focus on trying to take guns away from law-abiding citizens. That's not going to solve our crime problem. What will solve our crime problem is actually cracking down on gun crimes. They've directed U.S. attorneys in many cases not to pursue gun charges because those gun charges come with stiff mandatory minimums, which Kamala Harris opposes.
So are these do you see any action in the offing at all in the wake of this once again, or is it just going to be enforce the laws on the books?
Well, again, enforcing laws on the books is one way to stop gun crime. Another way is to keep police officers at schools. Many schools across the country have police officers, but Kamala Harris and her friends on the radical left were successful in getting police officers out of many schools during the BLM riots in 2020 and what followed.
So Congress won't do anything?
Well, look, most law enforcement happens at the local level. These police officers are not federal agents, they're local police department officers. But again, Kamala Harris and her friends on the radical left who oppose law enforcement, they wanted to get them out of schools. That's one way. It's not the only way, and it's not a silver bullet, but that's one way to help protect these schools, among many others.
You seen that, you heard that. Okay, Dana Bash here clearly is coming to this interview with an agenda that she would never come to an interview with a Democrat to push, right, in regards to pushing back against Democrats and their narrative. Because if she was a real journalist, she should have asked Kamala Harris about her apparent flip-flop from tough prosecutor to defund the police and let's take police officers out of schools, right? But Dana Bash didn't do that, right? She didn't press Kamala Harris. But again, she does that to Tom Cotton, even though Tom Cotton is telling the truth, right? He's telling the truth about Kamala Harris and the fact that she's not some tough on crime prosecutor. She's a far left progressive that is soft on crime. Now, Dana Bash tries to say, well, a lot of people were saying that she was tough on crime as a prosecutor. But it's like, Dana, why is it that you selectively use that instead of the fact that Kamala Harris has said that she wants to defund the police, she wants to take police officers out of school, and that's actually the real conversation that we should be having. We should be having a conversation about the things that Democrats advocated for and whether or not those things actually make the problem worse, okay? But again, what these people really want to talk about is why aren't the Republicans doing anything about this? AKA, why aren't Republicans signing up to take more of your rights away, right? This they want to do. But that's really not the conversation we should be having. The real conversation we should be having is about the gun violence happening in these liberal cities that the media doesn't seem to be concerned about, right? They're so concerned about these mass shootings that happen at these schools, which I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I'm just saying that there's a difference in regards to how they cover these things, right? You have mass shootings that happen every single weekend in Chicago, and the liberal media is quiet about it, right? Crickets. Okay, they ain't got nothing to say about it, right? But again, if we actually talked about that and why that is happening, then you have to point the finger at the Democrats and say, well, it's because they're soft on crime, right? They're not enforcing the laws on the books. And in the case of what happened in Georgia, I found it to be fascinating because now they're trying to set a trend that, hey, if you are a parent and you're reckless about allowing your child to get access to a firearm, then you're going to face consequences if your child decides to go out and to commit some act of violence. Hey, if they want to do that when it comes to these cases, I'm for it. But they also should apply that to all of these teenagers that are committing these acts of violence in these liberal cities, right? Maybe it's about time that we do start charging parents that are allowing their children to commit acts of violence. I wish that we would apply that to what's going on in these liberal cities, and maybe, just maybe, we'll actually see some progress in regards to cleaning up crime and gun violence in the places where you have the most gun violence in this country. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.